So allow me to give a brief introduction about our speaker from here. Dr. Glenn is currently Principal Lecturer in Psychology, Internationalization at Nottingham Trent University, England. He oversees all developments in the Psychology Department relating to internationalization. For several years, he was also leading the department with all activities relating to employability, such as student placements, integrating employability into curriculum, and providing work-based, work-relevant experiences for all psychology students. The department currently houses approximately 170 academic faculty members and an intake of 2,000 undergraduates and postgraduates per year, which makes it one of the largest psychology departments in the UK. He has worked at NTU from 2005 to 2015, and then from 2017 to the present day. From 2015 to 2017, he was principal lecturer and then head of subject for the psychological therapies and mental health group at Leeds Beckett University, England. He worked at University of Nottingham School of Nursing from 2001 to 2004 as lecturer in behavioral science. Before then, he has worked in the UK NHS or National Health Service and had been involved in researching patient-focused care, and he was the deputy manager for R&D and clinical audit with oversight on all R&D and clinical audits carried out throughout the NHS Trust. He has been engaged in research into psychological well-being and mental health since 1996, which was when he began his PhD in psychology, and his thesis was entitled Intrapersonal and Extrapersonal Factors in Stressor Perceptions, Coping and Strain among NHS Staff. Currently, his research interests lie in the field of psychology as it relates to spirituality and religion, and he leads a research group dedicated to these areas. He has been funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, primary care research networks, and through local governmental bodies to conduct a range of studies into psychological well-being and mental health. Dr. Williams is enthusiastic about using inclusive and engaging methods of teaching and learning, and he has been external examiner for undergraduates and postgraduate spot provision. He is keen to foster collaborations internationally and is particularly interested in trying out innovative methods such as collaborative online international learning so that his student and the student base with institutional partners can have truly global and enriching educational experiences. Without further ado, please welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Selamat petang and selamat bertemu. It's been really lovely to be here with you all. Hopefully you can hear me all right. I'm just trying to adjust the mic. Is that right? Double? Okay, great. So, the talk, as you can see, is to do with embedding employability and entrepreneurship using stakeholder perspectives to actually make that happen. So, here goes. The outcomes for today will hopefully be as follows. You've got 4 of those. So, number 1 is to find out about the results that we had with the 2 study projects that we had conducted into students' perspectives of employability. So what might be the barriers to the students getting some sort of employability skills, and what might be not only the physical barriers but the attitudinal barriers as well. So what might be getting in the way psychologically for them to become more employable and more marketable in the world of work. Then we're going to also look at what's happening on the ground. So I'll give you a couple of examples of how we've audited employability skills in our curriculum. And we're going to look at some modules, 2 modules in particular, where we've got employability at its main focus. We're going to reflect on what actually we get from trying to get employability in enterprise into the curriculum. But I'm also going to tell you a bit more in so doing about the advanced AG project that colleagues Helen Reid and Angela Vesey have done in this area. And then finally, we're going to look at issues relating to how you can embed employability and enterprise initiatives into the curriculum, but also to see this as a life-wide learning as well. We might think of lifelong learning, So over a trajectory of time, but also life-wide, trying to see what happens in the various spheres of our students' lives that can make them more employable. So, I'd like to try and get some interaction from you now, if this hopefully will work. So if you can please, feel free to pull out your mobile phones, and if you could, please just scan the QR code. Hopefully it works for some of you. I've got a few things that I've made earlier, but I'd like to find out from yourselves, what are you doing, or what could you be doing, to embed employability and enterprise into the curriculum? So I'd like to give about 5 minutes maximum to see if you can scan the QR code and type in some of the things that you are doing or could be doing to embed employability and enterprise into your curriculum. I'd love to find out more about that, so once you've done it, if you can, hopefully to get some sort of interaction, just give me a bit of a wave so I can see then how many of you have done it, or even if you don't want to do it, that's fine, give me a wave to say that's it, it's done. So at least I can get some sort of vibe for some of you having done it or thinking, no, that's fine, I'll pass. But the main thing is, once you're ready, then we'll have a bit of a share, and we'll find out what you've done at UPSI, which will be great to hear about. So I'll give you a few minutes, go for it. So the first one we've got, we see it looks like we've got quite a few starting to pop up. Number one is to introduce them to alumnus that have worked in the area. That's a good starting point. So you can really see that people can connect from what they're doing in their curriculum to where they would like to be. And then we look at another one of you have mentioned about practical skills, looking at real life experiences in industry and training practical skills. So hopefully we can give a few examples of that in this presentation fairly soon. So we've got 2 of you so far. Let's hopefully get a few more popping up. I'll see if I can refresh. Let's see if we get a few others coming up. Another one which looks like it has some parallels with the other one on practical skills. Occupational experience. Supervisory program course where students do small innovation programs, projects, or project ideas related to industries. I'm going to give you an example from the professional practice course about that. This is interesting. So we've got here, final semester students are encouraged to upgrade their previous project from previous courses, and they need to promote and put the product into potential markets to target users. If anyone can tell me what particular discipline is that, for whoever came up with that, give me a shout. Promoting and putting a product out there, so I presume it's some sort of a consumable that they're producing. Okay, I'll just give you a few more minutes. Well, what we'll do is we'll go back to that in a little while. I'll go back to the slides. Because there's been a bit of a late start, we can look back at some of the other ones like the next one about why does it matter in a short while. I want to try and see if I can do more sharing of what we've done, and hopefully we can get more sharing from yourselves as well. So don't worry about scanning this one, but we will be having a chance to do that in a short while. But like I promised you, we will be looking at students' perspectives of employability. And I mentioned to you about sharing the results from a 2-study project that we've been conducting. So in that study, what we wanted to do is it's mapping out over 2 cohorts. So number one, the cohorts of students in 2013, and another one in 2021. And so the main aim was that we wanted to see how students could understand and how they perceive what employability is. We also then wanted to look at what were the factors that influenced their own employability as well. So we've got these 2 cohorts. One is in 2013, and this is an important cohort because this is where we went up from the students paying, from the home EU students paying about £3,000 a year to then shifting over to paying £9,000 a year. And so they were starting to think, am I going to be getting value for money? Am I going to be able to walk into a job as soon as I finish my course? We also had then a cohort in 2021. Now, as you can probably guess, they were what they called themselves the COVID generation. So let's see what their perceptions are, if we can give you a few insights. So in study 1, that's the first cohort, we had 50 students in 8 focus groups. Then we had study 2, we had 43 students in 11 focus groups. And in both of those, we used what's known as deductive thematic analysis. What that means is that we've got a fairly good idea, theory-wise, of some possible understandings of employability, and so that's where we're deducting the possible themes, but then we're going to check with what themes we actually get from our data. And so we were able to get 3 major themes and 8 sub-themes. And in the study 2, we were able to confirm most of those as well. So here they are. So the 3 themes and then the sub-themes are as follows. How the students then saw employability was the first major theme was to do with their personal attributes. How they see themselves, but what the attributes were. So number 1, it's to do with their attitudes to work. Are they giving over a professional image of themselves? Number 2, do they actually show that they've got skills for a particular job or career? And then number 3, we'll start to look at some of these other things, but we can start to also understand the influential factors that can impact people's employabilities. So we can look at the microsystem, and that is the people around that individual. It might be their family members or friends. We then need to look at the mesosystem. I'll explain what the mesosystem is. So right now, as a group of lecturers, those involved with teaching and learning, you'll have others in your department, and they're all part of the microsystem. But you'll also have then your students, and they will be another microsystem. You might also have at UPSI some careers advisors, and they are also a microsystem. The mesosystem is whereby the different microsystems come into contact, and they might contradict each other or start to overlap nicely. So ideally, you want your careers advisors to be saying something very similar to what the students are looking for and to what you're looking for. So ideally, those 3 microsystems need to harmonise. We've also got the macrosystem, and that relates to economically what's going on within the country and also other employability factors. Finally, in terms of this second major theme, we need to look at other influential social factors. So it could be things like how social norms evolve over time, about what's right and proper with regards to the world of work. I'll give you an example. I remember when I was first in the world of work, we were using operating systems that were very antiquated compared to nowadays. We didn't have mobile phones that we were tapping into, and to ping over an email, it would probably take a long while for us to think that we would finally get there. So the evolving expectations about what's normal in an employability setting is quite crucial too. Finally, we have the third major theme, which is the type of work that students perceive themselves as being. So one is to do with this sub-theme about binary concepts. So students might see employability as to do with I am employable, and it's just to do with whether I'm in work or I'm out of work. So they just see it in that way, very black and white. There are other types of things that they could look at, which is not in the in or out of work, but whether it's meaningful work, whether it's something that's fulfilling to them. So let me give you some illustrative quotes from what we got with our 2 cohorts, and hopefully these quotes are visible. The first one is to do with attitudes to work, and as you can see here, one participant was saying, what I think has got her, and that's when they're looking at someone who's achieved something, I think what that's got her is that she's persistent and enthusiastic, and it's her personality, that the way she is an individual that has got her in that particular employment setting. So as you can see there, that particular participant is looking at how other role models are doing and looking at their attitude and what's got them in that particular role. Then we look at another sub-theme, which is skills required, as you can see going back again. So skills required for a job or career was the second sub-theme. As you can see with this particular quote, and this was the participant in, as you can see with the first quote, is taken from the first cohort. Participant 28, these are numbered, and they're taken from the second cohort, those taking part in our research in 2021. We can also see participant 42, saying as follows: I think employability is gaining relevance that are experienced like associate kind of role, developing skills like teamwork, communication, through these kinds of experiences. So they can start to dissect that they need to have teamwork, they need to be able to communicate effectively to fit in nicely in the world of work. You've also got another participant saying it's really important that if you're kind of thrown into the deep end within a workspace, you show that you're still organised, and that can be a really beneficial trait to have. So as you can start to see here, being organised, being a good team player, and being able to communicate. So our students then, in this study, were able to see certain facets about what makes them more employable. Then we have the microsystem that I mentioned earlier on. So it's either you as a group of lecturers, or other students within your course, or careers advisors. They've got all their own ecosystem of their own. So let's see what we've got here with this participant. This participant said as follows: I think a lot of it comes down to, for me, down to family as well, because the family I come from, everyone is educated to degree level. So it's like you need to be educated at this level because, well, that is the way everybody does it. So so you do it, and also it will help you get a job. So in a way, this participant sees that the only way to get themselves being employable is to follow the microsystem of their family. Now, we might not necessarily agree with that. In the UK, for instance, we have a variety of other ways to get by in the world of work. We have apprenticeship schemes, so you don't necessarily have to go to university and to get a degree. You can do a university supported qualification like an apprenticeship, but you don't have to go to university and you don't have to get a degree. But for this participant, they thought, I need to follow the family. Now let's have a look at the mesosystem. Now this one, we've got a person who didn't really agree with the advice that was being given by a careers advisor. So here we can see how the microsystem of the students and the microsystem of the careers advisor team really conflicts and doesn't harmonise. So we can see with this quote, I don't want to graduate and then go into volunteering. I don't want to. I need to get a paid job. And then we've got in brackets agreements. So the fellow students being interviewed at the same time were nodding and saying, yes, yes, I agree. And here we've got the careers advisor saying at the talk, this man, said basically when you graduate, it's not likely you will go into a paid job. And I was thinking, well, that's not really, the most positive advice. And the focus group participants were again agreeing. So here's the thing you need to bear in mind. Are you looking from the perspective of your students when we are looking at getting them more employable? How are we able to harmonise the two microsystems of the lecturers and the students? Now let's look at evolution. So in this quote, we've got a student who's saying, I feel that many people have degrees. You have to be more than everyone else. So I get scared, because like I'm kind of lacking in that section of what you do outside of your degree. This is what I'm talking about earlier on, about life-wide learning. Not necessarily lifelong learning, but also life-wide learning. And so you've got to actually show that you do more. So in a way, the world of work is so competitive. Then we can also look at just two other sub-themes. One is to do with being in a job versus not being in a job. So for students just starting out on a degree, they often think of employability as being in a job or not being in a job. They're that black and white. They start to, when they go into their second and third years, for instance, become a lot more refined. So one thing you'll see here is this student said it's the opportunities available to get a job after graduation, if you have the ability to achieve a job easily without trouble. So we've also got this other aspect about ease of access to a job. Finally, we've got something here about finding meaningful and fulfilling work. And this is more refined. So we see this one participant said, it depends what job or what side of employability I'm looking for. So if it's sort of a general sort of job in a shop or something like that, fine. I have the employability skills for that. But for my ideal graduate job, I've got nowhere near the skills I need. So that's where we've got students who may often want to make sure they've got the confidence and they can confirm they've got the skills they would need to go into a graduate job. So these are the different perspectives from a two-study qualitative project into how students see employability and then how they might put it into practice. Now I would like to introduce you to an audit that me and a placement student did of all the different modules that we have in the psychology curriculum at NTU. So one thing we wanted to do was look at how employability is addressed across those modules. And we wanted to look at it in the undergraduate. So the thing that we wanted to do is look at having an overview of employability skills in the undergraduate curriculum. We wanted to look at what's in the module specifications about what we say should be covered, and then also what is in the virtual learning environment. We wanted to look at ways of enhancing staff and student awareness of how we can uncover and apply employability skills in the curriculum. So what we did then was we did an audit with 68 psychology modules. We looked at 14 general employability skills that I'll tell you about in the next slide. And then we wanted to look at whether the skills are explicit, so they're actually there, they're in black and white, whether they're subtly covered, or whether they're completely missing. And so what we did generally was we found that there was a lot of coverage in a variety of areas, like teamwork and research, but there wasn't enough with regards to self-awareness. And so what we've decided to do is do a lot more with regard to reflective practice. And one of my colleagues is focusing a lot more on that for his sabbatical. I'm going to tell you now a little bit more about two modules that we've devoted to looking at getting students to be a lot more employable. The first one is the work-based psychology practice module. So here, this was a year-long 20-credit module. This was for level 6 students. Now, level 6 is the final year of an undergraduate degree. And the students needed to work together in teams. They needed to look at how to apply psychology in the real world. And they also then needed to have a short-term placement of about 30 hours in total. So that is relatively short-term. Some of our students have a sandwich placement that they on a work environment for an entire year. These students, though, got a taster for being in the world of work. They also had an assessment of what we call a synoptic assessment. In other words, they're reflecting. They're looking backwards of what they've done. They're looking at this moment in time with assessing their aptitudes, their interests, and then they're looking forwards for their career plans. And so we had a reflective essay, which they then needed to write. So the students had some challenges in trying to find a placement, working as a team for this module and presenting as a team, and being unfamiliar with reflective practice. And so that's something we needed to make sure we could do more of in the first and second year of their degree. But the benefits are quite numerous. So students were able to think about what good they were getting from trying to apply psychology to the world of work. Being able to really make a positive impact to service users, and they found that their confidence levels were improved. So that's one in-curriculum module that we had. Another one was professional practice in psychology. Now this is a module that was available to all of our students, and this is something again in level 6, so it's the final year. And it's a year-long module, and what students then do is they work as consultants to help organisations. An example would be National Literacy Trust or the Firefighters Charity. So those organisations need a problem to be solved. And so they work as consultant teams, and so they've been set these problems. And then in the professional practice of psychology conference, the students then present in posters where the organisations come to visit and find out more about the issues. So the assessment is a consultancy report, and the students also write an essay reflecting on their employability. So there are a number of challenges because they get, for us, trying to get scenarios from those employers and working through teamwork dynamics. We need to also try and allocate the scenarios effectively. And we need to try and keep that momentum going throughout the year. So the good thing is the partners, these organisational partners, get a booklet with each of the students' consultancy reports, so they definitely benefit. The students get to meet the partners, and also they get the experiences of presenting at conference. So they get this a chance to know what it's like to be at a professional type of event. So they can really hone their employability capabilities. So what we do, though, is when we're looking at our audits and auditing what we've got in our curriculum, as I mentioned, this is something we did with quite a lot of modules. Those were just 2 modules that we covered specifically to do with employability. And as you can notice here, we've got 14 employability skills that we audited, and we wanted to see how well each of our modules tapped into things like adaptability, analytical thinking, creativity, decision-making, the use of IT, oral communication, planning and organisation, and so on. As I mentioned, self-awareness we did less well on. So that was one of the least extensively detected employability skills. But other skills such as oral communication, teamwork, problem solving, they were less explicit as well. But some of the ones that we did really well with were analytical thinking, reading, the use of IT, creativity, planning and organisation, and working independently. Now, let me just give you an example though. And I've noticed that there's a bit of a Grads for Nottingham kind of has merged into the extracurricular activities subheading, so apologies for that. But Grads for Nottingham is an extracurriculum experience. And what it is that I'm going to share something with regards to Hannah Wiseman, my placement student, her experience of doing Grads for Nottingham. And what this was an exclusive initiative just for Nottingham Trent University students. It was a 2-week project. Students worked on this virtual scheme where they were working with students from other disciplines, and it was open to all of them from a variety of backgrounds, and they had 150 students, well over that, taking part in virtual team meetings and working for a variety of organisations, like Boots, which is a really well-known company, and that's based in Nottingham, all the way through to YMCA for Nottinghamshire, Trent Psychological Therapies Scheme, and so on. So Hannah Wiseman can share some of her experiences. So what she wanted to do is try and, for her scheme with Trent PTS, is that they need to work with 3 other students, and this was different from other courses, other modules she's been taking part in. So she needed to look at current marketing, social media, ways to address some of the ways to get people from minority groups to engage with the psychological therapies service that Trent PTS had. So what they did was they tried to create very engaging and inclusive content. They used Instagram a lot, which was to try and reach out to those from a particular demographic, and they got their engagement was much more increased over 2 weeks. They had a very much a sustainable social media approach, and one thing that Hannah got from this was she got great communication skills, was working well as a team member, she was well able to work with students and other employers, and she was able to work virtually, which is something she wasn't used to doing. And she was able to get more experience in social media and marketing, and she was able to think of jobs outside of psychology, traditional psychology routes. I'm going to tell you now briefly about the Employability Enterprise Initiative, and this is one which took part with regards to a number of stakeholders. We've got the NTU Enterprise Centre, NTU Employability Service, so that's one microsystem. We've got employers and community organisations, another microsystem. We've got alumni, some of you mentioned about the alumni earlier on. We've got the School of Social Sciences students, and we've got teaching staff. So all of them needed to work together to think about how you can get people to, particularly the students, to become more enterprising. So there was a 2-day enterprise event that my colleagues Helen Reid and Angela Veazey staged. And it was teaching students about enterprise skills, how to be effective consultants, and looking at ways to meet the challenges set by employers. And alumni fellows were those that were there at the same time supporting our students there. And so the outcomes that we expected were that the students were going to be opening their minds to entrepreneurial behaviours and cultures. So trying to be more creative, taking risks, showing drive and determination, all of those things that we'd expect for more enterprising behaviours. And so this got students to have a chance to work on real-world enterprise-focused challenges, getting them to apply theory to practice. And the things that we got for the school is that this is helping us to inform our learning and teaching across a variety of what we call TILT groups, that Trent Institute for Learning and Teaching groups. And we were able to share this with the universities from Nottingham programme, because we've got 2 universities in Nottingham. We've got Nottingham Trent University and University of Nottingham. So we're able to share our experiences with our partner. And what we also needed to do was try and share with this employability and enterprise agenda how we can get staff, all new staff, to take part in this non-credit bearing module. And what we had then was we got staff to look at having 6 hours of learning content to enable them to become more employable and enterprising. You'd think, because they're staff, they should be employable, but think back to what I mentioned to you earlier on. The less nuanced way of understanding employability would be having employability as black or white, in job or out of job, but employability might be more refined as to how we can have more meaningful and fulfilling work. So the main objective of this non-credit bearing module for all new staff was to get the new colleagues to be introduced to key concepts to do with employability and enterprise. And so this new online module was set up for NTU colleagues. It was very much connected with the national policy context that has been scaffolding us being more employable and enterprising, and for the key drivers, for particularly our Vice-Chancellor all the way down, has been very keen for us to bring about work-like experience for all of our students. And so we've got some sort of frameworks and modules. Doug Cole, one of our colleagues, has developed an employability model to look at ways to integrate employability. And as you can see here, in this employability and enterprise online module, staff were given experience of connecting with case studies and taking part in quizzes, discussion boards, and so on. I'm just going to take you through another particular experience, which was a collaboration we had with a university in Mexico. So this is the Success for All. Success for All is where we bear in mind that students, if they're perhaps from a lower class, lower academic background, we need to try and lift them up to make sure they've got equal access. But also for us to connect more globally. So let's look and see what happened when we were having this transnational community partnership with NTU and Sesi's, as you can see from this particular image. So with this Sesi's NTU collaboration, we were trying to make some sort of contribution to the socio-economic agenda of Mexico. We saw higher education as a way to get Mexico to grow more socio-economically. We got NTU's 6 strategic themes to do with connecting globally and employability. They were all very quite key for us. And we wanted to personally and professionally transform some of our NTU and Sesi's staff and students. So Angela Vesey and Helen Reid, as you can see on this image, they were working in partnership with Sesi's and designing a week-long program of employability workshops. And so that then got the key academics, the stakeholders, professional services staff, employers, young entrepreneurs and other Latin American academics to join together and to work together to bring about a more employable framework for people. They also, Angela and Helen, did some sort of pre and post partnership activity. They followed up with the stakeholder groups to see how it went and got some evaluation. And so here with the evaluation feedback, some of the people who took part, they said that it helped them to think about how to integrate employability into current assessment processes. It got them to look at the workshop addressing issues to do with higher education and how it can make a really positive social impact, not only for students but also with the higher education teachers. The actual Sesi's Mexicali NTU scheme also got resources that were then created that can improve both universities being able to enable students to be more employable. And as you can see with this final quote, it got people to expand more about how you assess people becoming more employable as well. And the Sesi's Mexicali students, they said as follows. They felt that they learned that their mindset can be really important, so they can take the decisions they got from this employability and enterprise workshop and grow as a person. They also had a scheme which some of you might be aware of, particularly to do with the employability of an elevator pitch. So I mean, the Americans call it an elevator, in the UK we call it a lift. But the main thing is, just imagine you're meeting someone in a conference, but you're meeting them in the lift. And you want to tell that person as they get from one floor to the next about what you do to get them enthused and to get to connect with them. And so in this particular scheme, the students were given a chance to do this elevator pitch. And they said they got many techniques that they could build on and create this elevator pitch to give something of their brand to whoever they interacted with. And they said here, I learned how not to get distracted from my career goals. So I just wanted to see how we're doing in terms of time, because I've shared a lot of information. I hope I do have a few more minutes, so I'm going to see if I can share this final one, where I'd like to get, again, if we can scan, just for a few more minutes. My final one is then just opening up for questions and answers. But what are the key barriers and challenges to embedding employability and enterprise into the curriculum for you? I've got some I've made earlier, but please have a go, and I'm going to check how you've got on in about 2-3 minutes. Okay, so go for it, and then we'll have a bit of a check-in. So what are the key barriers and challenges to embedding employability and enterprise in the curriculum? So some people have said inclusivity. So it's trying to make sure enterprise is accessible to students who may feel that enterprise is out of reach for them. I can speak personally about psychology students, where some of them think that if it's anything to do with enterprise, it's to do with making money. I would say that enterprise initiatives don't necessarily have to be to do with making money, it can also be having a social goods. As you can see here, we've got other things like seen as supplementary. Staff can view the development of transferable skills as a nice to have in the classroom. The subject content might be seen as coming first. We've also got on the bottom right, it's got here clarity about what employability is. And that's one of the challenges I've had, is that, as you can see with this person's quote, not all students or staff know what is meant by employability. So it reflects negatively in student feedback or is not recognised even if it is clearly there. Let me see if I can refresh. So we've got here students reluctant to do more of a project type assessments. We see here employability versus enterprise. Often that's conflated. It's useful to distinguish between the two as to what is employability, what is enterprise. And as you can see here, it still seems to be very perceptual. We've got here perceptions for both staff and students that employability and enterprise are supplementary and should be non-credit bearing. So as you can see here, we've got several comments about it being supplementary. And as you can see, finally I'm going to wrap up. Some colleagues debate the purpose of higher education. When the argument is such that degrees of interest ought to be more rounded, enterprise and employability is seen as optional and not fully integrated, fully integral. So I think the thing I'd like to wrap up with is that we might think of employability as being something which is a nice, useful add-on. But the way things are measured in the UK, and it might very well be the situation in Malaysia, if it isn't now, it will be in the future, particularly with regards to league tables. We all want to think about where our university is in relation to other universities. The key thing here is that it's making sure that in the metrics that students are saying, I got this job because of the course I did. I got these experiences and skills because of the course I did. Now, currently in the UK, we have the Graduate Outcome Survey, and that's in the period of around 13 months after students have graduated. And so we also then get measured on how many students are in a high-skilled job as soon as they have graduated within 13 months. If our students don't get many of those into, or former students get into those high-skilled jobs, that reflects badly on us. So in a way, we know that our agenda has to be shared, that we need to get our students to look out for those high-skilled jobs or to create them themselves. So that's why enterprise is also vital, because job creation can be something which is an area that our students, we really need to inculcate that kind of way of thinking, feeling and acting. What kind of creative opportunities can they have, and how can they develop a new future for not only themselves but their peers around them. Anyhow, I think I've taken up more time than I ought to, but this is thanks to my colleagues Helen Reid and Angela Vesey. My email address is there as well, glenn with 2 N's.williams@ntu.ac.uk, and Helen and Angela's email are there as well. Helen and Angela can talk more about the Sesi's partnership that they had in Mexico, but I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think there's a lot of comments that I can see in Padlet earlier about supplementary employability enterprise is not being looked at as something that we should really embed in the content of the course. I can probably start with, I think there's a lot of people probably here wanting to ask questions, but they need someone to start off with, I think. So I saw that in your one of your slides, you said self-awareness is one of the least extensive employability skills that you got from the survey that you did. Probably you can explain this a bit more. And also another question that I would like to ask you is about synaptic assessment. I think for me, it is rather a new vocabulary that I learned today, and probably you can explain about that a bit more. And what sort of challenge that you face? Because the last one that you showed us is in 2019, before the pandemic in Mexico. So during the pandemic, is there any virtual things going on, or probably you can explain that a bit more? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm trying to go through all of those in turn. So the first one about self-awareness, why that might be the least extensively detected employability skill. It's a difficult one because this is an audit of the psychology curriculum, and we were a little bit disappointed that our module leaders, when they're developing the modules, they're not doing enough to cover that, and yet we're trying to get our students to be more psychologically literate about how am I feeling, what am I thinking, what am I doing. And so when I presented some of my findings to the psychology management group, we were saying that we really need to find ways of addressing that. So we'd like to have more self-awareness in there, because it's thinking about how a person's behaviour might impact on someone else, how to make them feel, and so in a way teamwork does have a bit of a role to play, because if you're a good team player, you're showing higher levels of emotional intelligence about how you're feeling and how your team members are feeling. But self-awareness is something that we wanted students to get more of a handle on. So I think it's more a case of us trying to encourage our academics to have more of that in there. You mentioned about synoptic assessment. So with synoptic assessment, I'm just trying to see where we will have put that. Yeah, for the work-based psychology practice module. So this is a relatively new concept, but it's a bit like you driving a car, and you're looking at the rearview mirror. And so in the rearview mirror, you're looking backwards and you're seeing where you've been. So that's the first part. You're also noticing that you're in the car. So the car is currently moving, so that's where you are now. And then obviously you're looking across the windscreen and seeing about where you're going to be going. So synoptic is slightly different because it's meant to embrace all three views. So when you're assessing the students and trying to make them more self-aware, they're trying to think about what are my character strengths, because we get our students to do a measurement of their character strengths using the values and action character strengths assessment. We get them to also look at other areas in which they've expressed certain sorts of aptitudes. So they're looking in the past and where they've done that. And then they're looking at the current, where they are in their course, and they're looking future with an action plan. So that's what we do with our synoptic assessments. And then your third question was? Okay, yes, challenge during the pandemic. So, so the example we gave was the physical visit to Mexico. So what Angela and Helen did, so Angela's on the left and Helen's on the right, just near the letter T. So they did some online provision as well to try and make up for things, but as soon as we've got the pandemic and its hold having on us being released, over this summer, more recently, they were back in Mexico yet again, because we've got a strong relationship between SETIs and NTU as well. So I think we found that nothing beats actually being there in person. So we did try and make some sort of alternative arrangements for enterprise and employability education, but the best bet, I would say, would be to have a blended offering of face-to-face and online. And that's why I'm very keen to do things like collaborative online international learning. We've had experience of doing that with different courses, but also for our global summer school that Nottingham Trent University hosts. We have, in 1 week, we have students going on to our online course. They have to pay, but for our partners, the students would pay a reduced fee, and they cover a variety of courses, and that's just online. and then we've got other students will come to us in Nottingham for 2 weeks, and that's just face-to-face. But trying to do both at the same time is extremely difficult. And I've seen conferences where they've got someone dialing in, and you've got other people physically there. And I once went to a conference fairly recently in June in Bologna in Italy. I was about one of only a few people sitting in the room, and then lots of the speakers were dialing in and on the screen. And I thought we're kind of missing stuff. So for me, I'd say the best bet is to see if we can have as much human contact as possible, but noticing that the online version need not be a poor relative. We need to make sure we've got really strong infrastructure to support that. Because I would imagine also with UPSI, with your students, if you wanted to do online teaching, it really depends on how strong that network coverage is. And if not, the students really suffer for it. So I'm hoping that with your students coming back on campus now, that they'll really benefit from the contact they have with you.
Thank you. Is there any more question coming from the audience?
Hi everyone, afternoon. I'm not going to ask questions, just a sharing of maybe experience or the condition happened in our faculty. So I'm from Faculty of Science and Mathematics. So for your information, our GE means that the graduate employability among our graduate students was actually among the lowest. Very sad to say, was among the lowest in this university. So we actually have a problem how to increase the GE among our graduate students, especially for the degree students. Because as you know, we are a university of this education university, so we formed a program to train future teacher. So the student come in with the mindset that they will get posted as a teacher. But the thing happened is, after they graduated, after maybe 2 years, 3 years, they get nothing. So they have no place for them to be posted as a teacher, especially in science. Means that biology, science, chemistry, physics. So I can say that majority of our students jobless. So maybe you can give us some advice to how to increase the GE among our students, or maybe this is maybe related to the mindset, or maybe about the awareness.
Yes.
So maybe looking for your advice.
Well,
thank you.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the question. I really appreciated it. And I'm sorry to hear that you're struggling with the GE score that you've got, but the few things that I would say that might help, or they might not, it depends, is to get buy-in from your department's lecturers to make sure that you can audit what type of employability skills you're covering in all of your modules and your courses. So in the UK we'll call them modules. Overseas sometimes what we call modules are their courses. But whatever it is that you've got is to try and get an assessment of what type of employability skills the students are likely to get, but also to see if you can get some sort of feedback from the students, even if it's relatively informal, about what employability skills they think they're getting from those modules. And this kind of aligns with the point I made earlier on about the importance of the meso system, where you've got the micro system of a group of lecturers, and you've got the micro system of the students, and making sure that they overlap as much as possible and don't conflict. If they do conflict, then you've got problems, because it's almost like you're talking to a teenager, and the teenager is not listening. They're closing their ears because they then think you've had one experience where you've told them one thing they disagree with, and before you know it, their ears will always be shut. And so you can't then break through to them. So you need to make sure, that would be my advice, that you're open to their perspective about how they think they could be employable and how the curriculum currently makes them employable. So a consultation process, I would say, is important. But apart from consulting, is then making sure you have some sort of a loop of activities. So once you've got the data, you then start to see, well, which modules could we enhance the employability in? And how can we also enable our students to take part in some sort of reflective assessment, say at the beginning of the module, in the middle of the module, and at the end of the module, about how they are doing with regards to some of those employability skills. So we had 14 employability skills. I'll just see if I can get to it. Oh, sorry, I'll just get to the slides. So the example might be to see if you can look at whether some of these that hopefully in industry are also important too. And so if some of the students are struggling and they're out of work several years out of their course, they're not getting the opportunity in the curriculum to do it. It's looking for modules that, if they're not being developed yet, is to look for modules that need to be developed. And we give them two examples, where they have a short-term placement or they work on behalf of organisations. So in this one, it's working with organisations to set agendas. So in the case of maybe teaching, getting schools to set scenarios that are of particular concern for those schools. And it might be how to engage a child with autism. It might be how to get children with ADHD to respond more effectively in a learning situation. But whatever it is that matters to that school and in that particular class is for them to set those scenarios and then students to work in the team to come up with some solutions. So these would be some ways of doing it, I would say. The other thing I would also highlight as well is that it really also depends on what your university's careers advisors are also saying. Because if they are saying the kinds of things that our students are not happy to hear, so I'm talking about the MESO system, where you've got the student cohorts and then their careers advisors. If the careers advisors are just saying, well, it's not likely you're able to get many teaching jobs afterwards because of the way the economy is currently, think about how the students would then be feeling with their confidence being deflated, not feeling like they've got many career options. So, like some of you mentioned in one of the Padlets that we've set up, so if it was this one, what are you doing or could be doing? Some of you mentioned the example we've got is share your own experience in working in various industries prior to academia, or one of you mentioned introduce them to alumnus that have worked in the area. I would say it's getting people who are ambassadors from, so those who have graduated from UPSI, to come back. I mean, in the NTU we've got alumni ambassadors, and so it's working with those in the career service to go, what can we do to make sure there's that link between industry and the university as well. So I think those are the kinds of suggestions I would say to help to improve your GE ranking. Thank you. But good question, I appreciated that.
For now, we can wrap up. Thank you, Glenn. We, as a university, have something for you. Hang on.